Welcome to episode 7 of the Oregon Family Law Guy. I'm your host, Hansuri Lafarge, the Oregon Family Law Guy. And as always, we are here empowering Oregonians everywhere by showing them the ins and outs of Oregon family law. Today is August 13th, 2018, and please forgive the background noise that you hear. I think you guys probably hear some sort of sound of singeing or staticky. That is the chicken that is cooking in the background. I made the unfortunate mistake this week and really this weekend of not preparing my food during the weekend time because I was, quite frankly, got caught up on website stuff and managing that. So I'm paying the price because I am prepping up my food for the week. If you're anything like me, you'll find that really it's deadly if you don't prepare the food during the weekend, because during the week, if you don't have it prepared, you're eating out, you're spending all that money. It's not really that great. Hits the wallet pretty hard, and also it hits the waistline pretty hard as well. So it is right now 8, close to 9 p.m. and I'm just about the halfway point of cooking the chicken. So if you hear me pause, that is just me preparing the meal for the week. Anyway, just a few housekeeping stuff before we get into today's episode. As I mentioned on last week's episode, the website is up and running. You guys can visit the website by going to the OregonFamilyLawGuy.com. On the website, you will find both podcast episodes. You will also find the explainer videos that we have out. We currently have 2 explainer videos, more to follow. I'm also tinkering around with the idea of perhaps adding a blog component to the website as well. That's neither here nor there. That's something that I'm tinkering around with right now. I'm happy with the podcast format. I think it's going to continue. I think it just works for a lot of different people, especially for those of you that are driving, that are commuting, that are in the car. You don't really have the opportunity to read it. So I figured the podcast would work, but that's coming down the pipeline. As always, we're always up on YouTube. We're always up on iTunes. We're also up on Facebook. So check us out on the website, the Facebook, YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, especially comments. Keep them coming. Today we are talking about child support, and specifically we're talking about child support for children over the age of 18. And what happens when a child turns 18, what happens when a child turns 21, and beyond. Oregon is one of the few states actually in the country, I don't know if you knew this, but has child support that goes past the age of 18. Which brings us to our first question: how long are you obligated to pay child support in the state of Oregon? As some of you may well know, it's not 18. For the majority of the country it is. But here in the state of Oregon, what the law basically states is that child support goes up until 2 points. Either, number one, when the child turns 18, or before the child's 21st birthday, and the child is attending school. Okay? So if you have a child, what that means is if you have a child, okay, that's above the age of 18, they graduated high school, okay, and they are attending school of some sort. It could be a 4-year college, it could be a community college, it could be a professional or technical school of some sort. As long as they're attending school and they haven't reached that 21 mark, there is a child support obligation here in the great state of Oregon. Okay. Now, obviously, if the child is 18 and or passes the age of 18 and doesn't decide to go on to higher education or doesn't or finishes up and that's the extent of it, well, that's when the child support obligation would end. But specifically here in the state of Oregon, and what they label these particular children as is the Child Attending School, or CAS. And there is an obligation here for children to pay. Now, or for a person to pay child support. Now, there's, specific rules when we talk about children in that CAS, or Child Attending School, 18 to 21 category, right? One of the rules has to deal with enrollment, okay? So what the law basically states is for a child in that 18 to 21 attending school CAS category, they need to be enrolled in school, and they define here in the state of Oregon enrollment as maintaining at least half the caseload required or needed to be considered full enrollment in that institution that they have. So as long as they're having half that caseload, they are going to be considered CAS, and they are going to be entitled to child support. Some of you may be asking, well, how do they determine that? Well, the rules are that for a CAS child, okay, the way the scheme works out is that child needs to provide, the parent who's going to provide the support, notice of intent to continue school, number one. Okay, and number two, that child has to then give written consent to whoever that parent is that's paying child support, to get the records, the enrollment records, in order for that parent that's paying to verify, right? And that makes sense. That's something that is completely understandable. You obviously want to make sure that if a child is going to be, or if a parent or an obligor parent is going to be obligated to pay child support, that at least there's some sort of verification method to provide that support. And that's what the law basically states. One of the interesting things about kids within that category, the CAS child attending school category, is that whether or not that child is emancipated doesn't matter if they're still attending school and they're under the age of 21. So let me just break that down, specifically what that means. If you have a child, okay, that's over the age of 18, okay, they're living freely on their own, they're emancipated, they're not living at home with mom, dad, whoever, let's say they're married, whatever it is. The law doesn't necessarily distinguish one way or another from those children from other CAS children who are going to be receiving child support. So in other words, you can have a child that's completely emancipated, completely married, a grown person for all intents and purposes. As long as they're still attending school, that obligation to pay child support still triggers. The final sort of thing that you want to know about this is that one of the foils for CAS children is that the support in that particular case is going to go directly to the child. So whereas, normally the support, you would think about it going specifically to perhaps the custodial parent or whoever has guardianship, or, perhaps to DHS for DHS to then distribute to the child, it goes directly to the child. And it could go to DHS as well. Let me just clarify that. But DHS would then distribute it to the child as opposed to a custodial parent. So with all that being said, and this is sort of like a long-winded backdrop, what happens when the child is greater than 21? Well, the law provides at that 21st birthday, okay, even if they're attending school or whether or not they're attending school, the obligation ends. But one of the things that you want to keep in mind is the question of, hey, is there any way that someone can get child support after the age of 21? The answer to that is possibly, okay? And possibly in instances of the child, of a child with special needs. And here's sort of the kick. This is sort of very, I wouldn't say it's rarely done, but it's something that's, it's kind of unusual. The law in Oregon provides, and I'm going to read you guys the statute. It's called ORS 109.010. Now, it's something that I really commonly do because, quite frankly, I don't think a lot of times it matters what the statute is, but I think reading this is probably going to help try to explain this point. What it says over here is that parents are bound to maintain their children who are poor and unable to work to maintain themselves, and children are bound to maintain their parents in like circumstances. So I want to focus on the first part over there. What does it mean for a child? Well, what the state of Oregon basically says is that when they define children in this particular law, they're not necessarily talking about the age of the child, but the relationship of the child. Okay, it's that final part, children who are poor and unable to work to maintain themselves. So, under that particular language in that statute, you can think of a situation of a child who's greater than the age of 21, who's 21 or above. Maybe they have some sort of mental handicap or another handicap that renders them unable to work to maintain themselves. And using that language conceivably, a court here in Oregon may obligate a parent to continue to pay child support, and it's happened before. Now, I just want to be clear. This is not the rule. This is not the norm, okay? But I just want to sort of demonstrate for you guys that there may be instances, not a lot of instances, but there may be some instances where a child is greater than the age of 21 or 21 and above, and there's an obligation to pay child support. So it's a sort of very interesting wrinkle in the normal rule here in the state of Oregon that I just wanted to sort of elucidate. With all that being said, that concludes, and I know this was a shorter episode, but that concludes episode 7 here of the Oregon Family Law Guide. I've got to get back to cooking some chicken and preparing for tomorrow. In any event, I'll leave you guys with this. As I mentioned before at the top of the episode, the website is up, Facebook's up, YouTube is up. Well, like, comment, subscribe. I want to hear from you guys now. I'm seeing a lot of questions out there about support. I'm seeing a lot of questions out there about custody. So if there are questions that you have that you would like answered, I can't provide legal advice. I won't provide legal advice because, number one, that's something that, you just really can't do, either in the Oregon State Bar or really through this medium of a podcast because, as I tell you all the time, Oregon, family law and family law in general is extremely complex. But I think that I can sort of shed some light on a couple of different details and a couple of different questions that you may have. And I think that's really what the podcast is all about. So like, comment, subscribe, shoot messages my way. Anyway, I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you and have a good one.